Earlier this fall, some of you had the opportunity to hear Reema speak when she was at Rex Putnam for one of our Moving It Forward events. And from that launched an idea. What would it be like if she took this idea of transformation to our students? What would it be like if she had this opportunity to connect and ask kids to lean into vulnerability and work on their craft as a writer? Some kids who never saw themselves beyond that. I have a voice. And she did that. 33 different classrooms in our North Clackamas high schools this spring, working to help transform students' ways of thinking about themselves, as their writing can therefore transform the world as it transforms themselves. Inspiration, personal connection, voice, transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce Reema Zaman.
I know as a writer, and you know as a teacher, that to truly understand a story, we have to begin at the beginning of a story. So I'm from Bangladesh. I was born there in 1983, and I was raised in Thailand, and I didn't immigrate to the United States until I was 18. And like you, it was less that I chose this work than I was called to this work. And for me, my genesis moment happened when I was 11 years old. When I was 11 years old, a cousin, 20 years my senior in Bangladesh, tried to assault me. And I was lucky that I was able to get away, and I reported that story, and I reported every incident since, only to be silenced. And in that moment, as an 11-year-old girl, I realized a few things. First, I realized that for the culture of abuse to exist, it requires accomplices, and it requires the silencing of the voices and stories, namely of children and women. And I realized that if my family were to have a chance at breaking that trauma loop, it would be up to me to be the first generation to speak. I realized that if the adults around me were unwilling or unable to speak because of their fears, their wounds, and their conditioning, then it was upon me to grow up, to be a voice for the stories and souls that have been silenced. So I worked hard through high school, and I was determined to graduate with honors and immigrate to the United States to be a gender studies major so I could be a voice for the voiceless. And I studied theater and women's studies in Skidmore College, and I started working as an actress and a model in New York. And I initially came here on a student visa, and then my agents started sponsoring my visa, and all was going well. And when I was 25, I fell in love with the man that I would marry, a beautiful American man, and it was through our marriage that we applied for my green card. He was born and raised in wealthy California, born and raised with every privilege under the sun, including the privilege of being treated as America's almighty son, and around him I orbited. And soon enough, a pattern arose. The more successful I grew as an actress, the more controlling and domineering and abusive he became. It was as though he believed there was space only for one voice in the household, and that voice had to be his. He started going after other women. He started controlling all of our finances. He started policing my clothing choices, even wiping makeup off my face, anything to dim me, to make me smaller. And then one day he started calling me his wife for greensies, not for realsies, to remind me that my green card was dependent on him, to remind me that were I to misbehave or speak out, I could be rejected and even deported, to remind me that power only responds to power, and in his eyes, I, as a Bangladeshi woman, to his white, male, superior American privilege, he believed I was powerless. And I call this immigrant abuse, when one person uses an immigrant status or the threat of deportation to intimidate, control, extort, or abuse. And so I started writing. And mind you, remember, I was an actress back then. I didn't identify as a writer. I had never even thought about writing a book. But it was as though my human instinct kicked in and my inner voice just whispered persistently, start writing. And I started writing initially to understand and process this nuanced and very dangerous situation that I found myself in, where I was unable to speak to anyone else or seek support from anyone else. And I also started writing to create documentation were he to ever become violent, and my testimony was needed in court. And soon enough, writing became my fortification. The more I wrote, the more confident I became, until I started saying a word that I had been trained to never speak to any man, and that word is no. No, no, until finally, one day, he evicted me from our home. I had $60 from babysitting that day. I had my laptop, and I had my newly discovered voice. I was homeless, but euphoric with purpose. I realized that as my newborn writing had given me the strength to exit a toxic situation, I had a deep responsibility to develop that body of work for anyone who may need my words. And I bought a one-way ticket to my Mecca, Beaverton, Oregon. That was in 2013. And I came here because my mother and my stepdad live out in Beaverton. And for one calendar year, I devoted myself for 365 days to work on this book that I knew could be a manual of healing and resilience for others. And I started working for the Tiger Tualatin School District, first as a crossing guard at Mary Woodward Elementary School, then as a reading aide for first, second, and fourth graders. Then I had a fabulous stint as a cashier at Whole Foods and a daycare attendant at KinderCare, all the while waking up at 4:30 in the morning to scribble away at this manuscript that I knew could have some purpose in someone's life if I put in the work and discipline. And then, lo and behold, I signed with my dream literary agent in New York. We sold the book to my dream publisher, and the book came out in February, just 5 months ago. And it has changed my life overnight. Really, overnight, after 30 years of hard work. It debuted as a Powell's bestseller. It took me on a 4-month tour throughout the United States. I've had the privilege of visiting 14 different states with different demographics of races, ages, religions, creeds. And it has proven to me that we are more alike than we are different. Everywhere I have gone, I have had people come up to me, strangers who have read my book, and so we have become family. They have come up to me and they have said, me too. The details of my story are different, but I too understand what it's like to feel abandoned or rejected or voiceless or invisible in society. Your book has become my book. And throughout those 4 months, I would travel back every few weeks to come to Oregon and work with my beloved cohort of teachers from the North Clackamas School District to develop a curriculum that we have been teaching our kids. And the curriculum is devised of 20 writing prompts, each of them designed to help our students learn how to use the craft of writing, to repurpose pain into empowerment, to repurpose the brutal realities of life, to find their powerful voices in life, so that they can be agents of change, joy, gratitude, and resilience in the world. And you and I are bonded in a shared mission, which is to best serve our young people. And I thought to be the best I could possibly be as your keynote, that I would sit with the findings that we have been able to gather over these last couple of months to understand what has led to this uniquely strong bridge And what has been unique to this journey of this book and the work we have done with the students through this particular unit. And I've come up with 5 critical takeaways that lead to building strong bridges. Number 1 is connect through tenderness, solidarity, and innovation. So, I Am Yours is a really unusual, odd book. It is literally the first of its kind. It's a new genre that I invented, and it's called a shared genre. And if you were to go online on the Library of Congress and type my name, or type I Am Yours, or type shared memoir, there would be only one of us. And I have a profound respect for tradition and the classics and punctuation and grammar, and you can probably tell. But the reason I wanted to create something new is because I started sensing, and you probably have as well, I started sensing from 2013 that there was a rumble afoot. I started sensing that humankind is caught in a trauma loop of aggression and toxic power and sadness and hatred and disconnection. And what I know to be true is that all of that traces back to pain, and when one is in pain, one needs love. To heal the old wounds of society, we need new medicine. And so I set forth to invent an entirely new genre called shared memoir. And the way this works is that I Am Yours is crafted as a 300-page long love letter spoken directly to the reader. I break the fourth wall and I directly address the reader in a tone of deep tenderness and respect. This means that through chapters when I'm going through adversities in my life, I look to the reader and we engage in a dialogue of connected resilience. There's lines like, "Here I sit on the bed in the deep, inky, quiet stillness of night, and out of the darkness I hear your voice. I hear you tell me, pain cannot be evaded, it must be worked through. You have the power to transform tragedy into triumph. You will survive and thrive by the simple skin of who you are. Adversity is but an anniversary of your next new talent. Above all, remember that you are the spine of your life, and remember that I am here, I love you, and I am yours." Which is why there is the title of the book, I Am Yours. I Am Yours is a vow of solidarity between author and reader. The other main thing about this shared memoir is that the pronoun I use throughout it is we. I treat the reader as though they are ageless, genderless, and raceless. And you and I, we are traveling this journey together to learn from the past so we may rise into the future. So by the time we get to page 300, the reader has now been convinced that they are capable of deep resilience, courage, and wisdom, that we have been bonded throughout this journey instead of disconnected through this journey. And after treating them with deep tenderness, respect, and affection, that feeling of love settles inside. And I believe that's why so many of our students have bonded as strongly as they have with this odd, bizarre book. Because if you are immersed in an experience that makes you feel cherished, valued, seen, and understood, you're going to want to participate in that experience. I have loved hearing from teachers and even parents that the very students who hate reading, or the very students who very rarely do their work, especially their writing assignments, they have wanted to do this work. The next takeaway has been heal through relatable literature and intuitive teaching. So one of my favorite lines in that video is the last line of the pledge that the students wrote. the line, "I am man, I will stay." And that line always chokes me up. And it was so important to the students to close with that line because many of them have had fathers who have not stayed. Many of them have had mothers who have been unable to stay or are emotionally not present. And many of these stories are because of a lack of opportunity, a lack of privilege, of choices that have been outside of parents' hands. Many of our students don't have that adult advocate at home. And they have found themselves reflected in this book because they understand what it's like to feel left. They understand what it's like to then search for tools to survive that absence. And that's why they have felt ownership over the material. And when I set out to write I Am Yours, I wanted to create the iPhone of memoirs. And what I mean by this is a unique invention that has been meticulously designed to intuit the reader's needs and then give tools for them to feel connected, valued, fulfilled, and transformed. And that's what I mean by intuitive learning and intuitive teaching. Our young people have been the first generation to grow up with the term in-school shooting as part of their general lexicon. Our children are the first generation to grow up talking about depression and mental health issues and the Me Too movement, and they are looking to us for tools on how to process that, how to navigate those waters and make it to the other side. They have had an accelerated growth, but they're still looking to us for tools on how to process that accelerated journey. And it is up to us to supply teachings that allow them to actually navigate that journey. So I talked to you about the unique design of the book itself, and I'd like to talk to you about the unique design of the unit we created itself. So all of the writing prompts, I mentioned there are 20 of them, and they are created to help a student develop higher levels of gratitude, empathy, forgiveness for self and others, resilience, and sense of purpose. And I mentioned in that video that the first exercise that they begin every class period with is they write in a gratitude journal. Because studies have shown that the most emotionally resilient human beings, one of the things they have figured out to do is how to pause from adversity instead of slipping into darkness and being able to focus on the gratitude in their lives and in the value that they hold within as human beings. So this gratitude journal, it's designed differently than your usual conventional gratitude journal. We ask the students to write 3 things. 1, something they are grateful for out in the world. 2, something they are grateful for in their relationships. And 3, and this is the most important, a skill or quality or value that they are grateful to possess. This 3rd one really helps them pause and consider an internal reason for them to feel confident and to have self-esteem versus placing all of their power of their self-esteem in external forces. And through this exercise, we have seen by surveying the kids from the beginning of the unit to the final day of the unit, how they have had greater self-esteem and confidence by doing something as seemingly simple as writing in this very particular gratitude journal every day. Following the gratitude journal, they'll do a writing prompt. One of the early writing prompts in their unit is a writing prompt that asks them to do the courageous work of identifying a core childhood fear or wound. And we ask this in, again, that tone of great tenderness after we have created that bond of trust and communion. We ask them to go into their past, and they feel safe enough to do so because we've already established that rapport of tenderness through this common reading. And the prompt we give them is, describe the first time you were made to feel small or insecure by someone else, or the first time you witnessed injustice or smallness be committed against someone else? And so they write about that, and then immediately we give them the literary balm to that wound. We give them the tools. The next writing prompt is, now write about how this moment of witnessing or experiencing injustice can be transformed into a call to action or a call to purpose. It can be transformed into a cause that you are passionate about embodying. So students have been writing breathtaking memoirs, like they begin by detailing a time when they were bullied in middle school and how, through that experience, they were able to develop greater empathy for their friends and classmates, and how their first moment of call to purpose came in high school when they witnessed someone else being bullied, and they rose up and used their voice to stand up in that name of that other human being. Another student wrote about how his moment of smallness and moment of call to purpose and greatness occurred on the same day. It was when he was in middle school and he received a text from his best friend who went to a different middle school, and the text said, "There is a shooter in my school, I love you." And this young man wrote about how in that moment he had never felt more small or afraid or voiceless in his life. And it was through that pain where he also realized his call to action, which is he alerted his teacher of what was going on. He used his voice to let everyone know what was going on, and he was able to text his friend back to be a voice of compassion and empathy and solidarity as she went through that experience. And thankfully, everyone was okay. These are just some of the memoirs that the children have written. And they're not children, they're incredible young people who have gone through so much and have so much to teach us and so much to teach the world. So the critical takeaway here is heal through relatable literature and intuitive teaching by providing our young people tools that allow them to not only navigate, but rise beyond the adversities that are so common in their young narrative. Takeaway number 3 is communicate using a common language. So this generation is the first of social media. I definitely did not have social media growing up. I didn't even have a phone until I was 21 and in college. A smartphone, I mean. We all had the landlines. And the data shows that the way human beings process information has been increasing in speed over the last couple of generations to an all-time high speed in this generation. And it's up to us to learn a common language instead of asking our young people to travel the bridge to us, right? It's just our responsibility. One of the ways that I have tried to teach the students about taking the learning off the page and into the world is by engaging with them in the way that I do my Instagram. So my metadata shows me that my Facebook readers are mostly age 30 and above, and that's our demographic. But my Instagram readers are all of our high school students and people in their 20s, and that is the way that they are connecting, and that is the way that they are digesting a lot of the knowledge and the communication that is swirling around us. And so I have something called Love Letter Mondays, and it's a series that I post every Monday, and it is just much like the pledge. It is a love letter that I write for all of us, and I send out into the world. And so, for instance, here is this week's Love Letter Monday. I'll read it to you. And my data shows me all of our kids are reading this. So this is my, you know how zucchini bread is how you get your children to eat vegetables? This is how I get our children to eat vegetables. Love Letter Monday, the power of uncertainty. The older I get, the easier it is to make difficult decisions. It's because as time passes, I become clearer about who I am and what I want from myself, my career, my legacy, and my relationships. The difficult part of difficult situations come mainly from the fear of uncertainty. Therefore, once you've done the work to clearly articulate your values, needs, standards, desires, goals, and who you are, all you have to do is raise that list of your inherent truths to compare side by side who you are with a particular circumstance and decision, to measure the alignment or the friction, to hold yourself accountable to your deeper purpose, direction, and integrity. The daunting sum total of uncertainty is alleviated. The uncertainty of not knowing the eventual outcome remains, but it isn't compounded by the uncertainty of confusion. Confusion like, but what do I actually want? Is this situation, offer, or person actually good or bad for me? Worry is wasteful. Use every day to develop greater clarity and control over the one thing you can ultimately control, yourself. The one thing you can ever truly know, yourself. We can't control every outcome, but we can certainly invest energy into becoming the truest, most clear-headed, honest, and bravest version of ourselves. Bravery does not come from a lack of fear. Bravery comes from the presence of clarity. Remember, from I Am Yours, uncertainty is a form of limitlessness. All I need, I have. Love, Reema. And so I can see by the numbers that one by one, our young people read this. And they sit with it, and I can see who's reposting the story, reposting the post, and they start contacting, and we have a dialogue about this. And perhaps the most proudest thing that I have in my life is that I've normalized the use of the word love. Because isn't all of our lives a bit better the more comfortable we become with talking about things like, if you were to write a love letter to yourself, what would it say? And that is one of the early writing prompts in the lesson. We ask the students to write a love letter to someone who is in need, and that person may be themselves. And they have said that that's one of their favorite exercises. And it is amazing to hear these 17-year-old boys say, yeah, it's one of my favorite exercises. I wrote a love letter to my inner child. And if you had told me like 4 months ago that I would hear a young man say that, well, we've normalized love. We've normalized conversations of healing and wisdom and inner clarity, and that's why they've been yearning for this, you know? They've been yearning to feel seen and understood, and that's why they have bonded so much. And so that's the takeaway here, which is develop a common language. Have the courage to leave behind what we know as tradition that was part of our generational lexicon, and develop a bridge with the young people in our lives, because it is by developing a unique common language that we're able to deliver invaluable, powerful knowledge. Number 4, empower through representation, diversity, and inclusion. So one of the earliest memories I have is from preschool, and from looking through every book in my little preschool nook, looking for a book that felt like my own, looking for a character that looked like me, looking for characters that felt like my family, looking for a world that reflected mine. And this is a common theme in I Am Yours. It's a narrative thread that goes throughout the entire book. And because we grow up with little Reema, she begins at age 3 and then goes up to age 31. And each chapter, I fall in love with a new book of that age. And I keep on searching for one mysterious book that can hold the whole of me. So the first book I fall in love with is Corduroy, because I really can empathize and identify with the fact that because this little bear had a missing button aka an imperfection. He wasn't allowed to find a home until he found his button. And that's how my young mind, and that young girl who was the only brown girl in her classroom, that's how I interpreted that you have to become perfect in order to find a home. And I identified with corduroy, and still, I felt like it wasn't completely my common language. The next book that I fell in love with was The Giver, and I completely identified with that, the hope for a better world, but then how so much can happen through toxic power. And then the next book after that is The Wrinkle in Time. The next book after that was Love in the Time of Cholera, and so forth. And I go through I Am Yours, always in search of one particular book that will feel like my world. One author and one voice, whose voice will be able to soothe the whispers and wounds of my life. And as that journey goes on, parallel to that journey was a 15-year battle with anorexia, a 15-year battle with deep insecurity, and a 15-year battle with finding myself in a toxic trauma loop of abusive situations and dangerous relationships. And so here's the correlation I know. If you grow up feeling invisible in the world's gaze, if you grow up not finding yourself in the television screens and in the literature put before you, that messaging that you will receive is that you are unworthy of the world's attention, that you do not have the skills or the talents or the inherent value to be the lead character in anyone's narrative, including your own. And that can manifest as deep feelings of invisibility and insecurity and an addiction to harmful situations. Because if the only message you have received from the world is you are invisible, you will honor that messaging, you will honor the darkness, and you will fulfill that prophecy by treating yourself like you are a secondary character in your own relationships, in your own life. And so, at 29, it dawned on me that perhaps the book I had been seeking my entire life, a book that would make me feel truly reflected and represented and seen and heard, was a book and a voice I had been holding inside of myself all along. And that's one reason I sat down to write this book. And it is no accident that only after I started writing did I gain true self-esteem and confidence. After a lifetime of feeling invisible in the world's pages, I wrote myself into existence. And this is why representation, diversity, and inclusion matter. Because to see oneself is to find oneself. If we do not see ourselves reflected in the proverbial and actual podiums and boardrooms and pages and television screens of life, we will feel like we are not worthy of being the lead character of our own narrative. And the antidote to that is to write our own narratives. And this is one reason why the students have bonded so much with this book, is because they see themselves reflected in these pages, far more than the traditional and long-standing lead character in many of the books that they have been given in years past, which is the straight, white American man of certain privilege. And there is nothing wrong with being that way. My stepdad, who is my best friend and my hero, is a straight white man. But he also went through a childhood and early adulthood of adversity, and it is over that overlap that he is able to be my hero. It is through our overlap that we connect and we're able to empower each other and ourselves. Does that make sense? It is not the perfections of a person that makes them a role model. It is the overlap between us and them, between we, us. It is in the overlap that we empower ourselves and each other. And that's why it is critical to empower through diversity, inclusion, and representation. That's the critical takeaway of this one. Number 5, transform through transparency and hope. So there are so many brutal realities that our young people are already aware of, and we run the risk of harming them or traumatizing or re-triggering if we are transparent without a tone of tenderness and hope. It is critical to have a merging of both, right? And that's why all the other takeaways were so important to learn, that if we're engaging in the issues that we need to engage in, racism, misogyny, the Me Too movement, mental health issues, shootings, suicide ideation, we need to engage in those issues because it is only responsible, but we need to also do it in a tone of radical revolutionary hope, so that our children are instilled with the feeling that, yes, this is going on, but yes, I can also be an agent of change in the world. One of my favorite memoirs that has been written by one of our young women is that she found her voice in her moment of smallness because through an abusive relationship that made her feel the smallest she had ever felt, she also rose into her power because she ignited her own voice to speak up for herself and her mother. And now her call to purpose is to be a voice for others who have also felt marginalized and diminished. And that is because we have had the merging of transparency and hope. Our students are so wise, they're so mature, and they are ready for this. And it's just up to us to be brave enough to venture in. There is a reason why the word courage lives inside encouragement. We cannot motivate and encourage someone through cliches or platitudes. We have to be courageous through vulnerability, courageous through transparency, courageous in our hope and faith that the world can indeed become a better place. And it is by displaying tremendous courage in the face of adversity that we motivate and inspire each other. And that's certainly how the students have motivated and inspired me. And so that's takeaway number 5, which is transform through the merging of transparency and hope. Literature is a call to action. Literature is healing and a balm. And I believe so is teaching and education. To be an artist, to be an educator, is to be an advocate. And it's such an honor to be amongst you and to be collaborating with you. This is what I know, that when we lean in with love, innovation, and intention, miracles can happen. When we lean in with love, intention, and innovation, trust can be forged, wounds can be turned into wisdom, pain can be repurposed into empowerment. When we lean in with love, intention, and innovation, bridges can be built. Thank you.